Welcome to We in Lewes, a podcast dedicated to celebrating the remarkable, creative, and energetic people who live in Lewes and are helping our community forge a collective soul as appealing as it is unique. These are their stories in their words. They are the we in Lewes. I'm your host, Kevin McGinnis. We're thrilled today to be joined by Ed Shockley, a true Lewes local, a singer, songwriter, producer, and a founding member of the town's favorite band, the Funsters. He's been named the Rehoboth Beach Jazz Festival's Ambassador of Music and described by the magazine Delaware Today as a legend of rock. Throughout his career as a musician, Ed has been part of numerous groups, from Jack of Diamonds to Vinyl Shockley to the Reminders, lived in New York City and was part of the music and advertising scene there before moving back to Lewes. Today, it seems he's drumming and singing somewhere in the area every night and day of the year, and each time, like so many good performers, letting us get a glimpse of the remarkable man he is. Today's episode is brought to you by the Lewes Chamber of Commerce, which was organized in April 1975 to advance the general welfare and prosperity of the Lewes area so that its citizens and all areas of its business community could prosper. Betsy Reamer and her team have certainly accomplished that. Over the last couple of years, membership has doubled, and the number of events they sponsor is massive, from the Lewes British Motorcar Show to the Lewes Garden Tour to so many other smaller ones like this podcast. If you're visiting, the Chamber's office at the historic Fisher Martin House at 120 Kings Highway basically doubles as a visitor center. Ed, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kevin. Good morning.
Listen, I know I promised you a relaxed setting with Cattle King leather chairs, a cool breeze, and a bottomless tab. Obviously, I lied. We are sitting on stools at the bar of Kindle, and it's 9:30 in the morning, and neither the restaurant nor the bar is open. I'll make it up to you. I promise. But since you're here...
All this wine, and you can't drink our drop, I'll tell you what.
Before we get to the music, I think we should get to the important stuff. How was the Lewes Doodah Parade born over 50 years ago?
My parents and their group of friends had a 4th of July party every year, and there were 5 core families, but then, another circle of friends. It was quite big, and my mother's best friend, Phyllis Hainan, was a nut about the 4th of July. That was her favorite holiday. So she always, made a big deal of it. There was one year, the town, for some reason, and this would have probably been in the mid-'60s, didn't have the events on 2nd Street for the children. And so the kids were rammy, and so the moms, with my mom and Phyllis being the protagonist, went and got pots and pans and lined the kids up, and they marched around the block. Now, this was at the Hainan's house on Chestnut Street. So we just marched around the block, and there's a lane behind Chestnut and Savannah Road that still exists. And so that's what we did. And so the next year, my parents had bought the lot behind their house on McPhee Street. And so our property went from McPhee to Manila. So we had that big open space. And our family from Alabama were visiting. So my mom wanted to have the party up there. And we did the same thing that year, marching around the block. The next year, they got a little bit more ambitious. And they would wait until it was cool enough in the afternoon to do the parade, which sometimes would be 6:30. Now, by 6:30, a few people had cocktails, I suppose, and they got braver. One of the only, beside my dad, who was all in and marched carrying a drum when we didn't put the drums on a float, Bobby Wilkerson had an Eldorado convertible, and we put a battery-powered record player on the hood playing John Philip Sousa, and then we lined some cars up, and we rode slow over to Lewes Beach and back. So we were getting more daring. So next year, we did the same thing, only when we got to the stop sign at Kings Highway, Phyllis Hainan, who led the parade, with a tall, I don't know what it was. I think it might have been a mast from a sunfish that was wrapped up with red, white, and blue bunting with a flag on it, which she called the Mighty Shaft. And she was funny that way. She was ribald and could get away with anything like that, and nobody would find offense. But anyhow, she took a left, and I can remember all of us in the saying, because we were marching. Well, we pulled that off. Then the next year, we were there, and the police came over and said, "You can't do this," and which was reasonable, really, when you think about it. So. Mom and Phyllis went inside and called our mayor at the time, Al Stango, and said, "Al, they're not going to let us have the parade." He said, "I'll be right over." Well, Al showed up in a police car, and he led the parade. A little side note, he turned down Madison Avenue, which was a dead end. And the whole parade had to come back. That was Monty Python-esque, really. It was through the years, as our parents got older and they passed away, my brother and I, and the Phil and Tom's children, Kathy Hainan, Rick Hainan, and John Hainan, carry the torch for this. The town had put us under their insurance for the parade. A couple of years ago, they decided that we had to officially apply for the parade and pay a nominal fee for that, and we needed insurance. So the five of us formed a LLC and buy the insurance for the parade every year. The spirit of the parade, as a come as you are, we march under the banner of We the People. One of the fun things of the parade for me has been, and from my own self, going through a period of time where I was, and all the kids my age were too cool for school, and we didn't want to be seen in that parade, acting
in your mom's parade,
acting
right.
foolish,
Yeah.
And then to be, the spokesman for the parade. And I've seen that happen, and those kids now have kids, and I've seen those kids go through that, but they all come home, and it's a beautiful thing.
Have you ever missed a parade?
Only one. I had a big concert. I don't know how that ever worked out, but I made it a priority. When I was in New York, I still tried to, and I did maintain a family balance that many people that I was competing with would give their left arm to have an audition somewhere. They'd miss their mom's birthday, for instance. They'd miss Christmas, Thanksgiving. I didn't do that. I came home as much as I could.
What is the significance of being pelted by marshmallows and tortillas? Where did that come from?
I don't know. Riding in the parade, we don't experience.
Because you're playing.
Yeah,
right.
And riding, we only see what happens. We last year, one of the floats that apparently is involved with the water war with people were right behind us, so we saw that for the first time. And that was interesting because people go all out, and they ambush them in places, and it's usually so hot getting wet that it doesn't really bother you.
And tortillas?
Don't know.
But they get thrown, right?
Oh yeah, they do. I've heard that. One year, someone dressed up like Barney, and the teenage boys absolutely were relentless. They were throwing hard objects at him. Whoever it was just had to drop out of the parade. So, it's the common denominator rules.
Has it for you kind of evolved from something that was your mom's thing and spontaneous to now it's something that actually has to be planned?
Oh yeah, and when the town asked us to do what they did, which it's not unreasonable, because the next step would be the town taking the parade over, and then everybody would have to, that wanted to be in the parade, would have to, sign up. It would be out there at the school. The route of the parade would be different. I hope that never happens, but I have a sneaky suspicion it probably will.
Because it's still something that I think is sort of almost from another era.
Yes.
It's just a group of people getting together and having
is.
some fun without having to involve lawyers and insurance companies and whatever.
Other people get to see the parade, I never get to see the whole parade because a lot of times we'll pull over, say, in front of Lloyd's instead of turning on so we can see people. But a lot of people start to peel off once we turn back onto Savannah Road. People will make their getaway. So we never get, but I get to see the people. It's emotional.
And how many people are in the parade now?
Gosh, I have no idea. It's I would say it's about a quarter of a mile long, though.
Really?
Yeah. The first year that the head of the parade, turning back onto Savannah Road from 3rd Street, met the tail end of the parade coming from Kings Highway, we were like, wow, this is something. we never expected it. We never do, And, so it's
so because you technically not necessarily know who's going to show up in a given year.
No, we don't. When we still had that property on Manila, which we recently sold, that was a staging area, and my mother's beauty parlor, was there, and that became kind of the headquarters. There was a bathroom in there, and the people the families that originally came to the 4th of July party would show up early, and then we would come back and eat. People would bring covered dishes, and we would have a little party there before everybody went over to the beach to watch the fireworks.
Ed,
yeah,
what's the origins of the name, the Doodah Parade? Is that from Camptown races?
We just always refer to the parade as the 4th of July parade. Dennis Forney named the parade, and he did a story about it in the Gazette and referred to it as the Doodah Parade. And when I told my mom and Phyllis about it, they said, what in the hell does that mean? And so I explained to them that Doodah kind of meant something just happening spontaneously with no care to it, and my understanding of it. And they said, well, isn't the 4th of July parade good enough? And I said, well, I guess not. And so it was that it needed a handle. It did, and that's a good thing. And it is a Doodah parade. It really is. But I think that they, in their mind, and somehow they always had a suspicion that somehow they were making fun of the parade, which I don't know why they would have thought that. But
your mom obviously had a great sense of humor.
Yes.
But when you tell stories, she was also a pretty formidable woman. Is that right?
Yeah, she was. It was funny because my mom came here after the war. Her father, this was his first posting after the war. He was a master sergeant, and he was the chief of military police there. And his job post-war became he went to forts and camps that were being dismantled, and he was a billeting officer. So he figured out where the guys that were re-upping were going to go. He took inventory of all the stuff that was going to be put into storage and stuff like that. And they came from a city in Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama, which is famous for the Redstone Arsenal, which is where our missile program. That's where Werner von Braun was, and
it has a rather significant German community.
Yes, it does, and very unique down there. My great uncle, for instance, worked at the Arsenal, and he probably dropped out of school in 5th grade, and he was the guy that put the last heat seal on the hatch where the astronauts went into capsule. Now think about that.
Wow.
He had those shields that reentry shields. He lived in the country, and he had those as ponds. He had some of them, great big ones, hanging up as gigantic bird baths. His name was Pink Atnip. Anyhow, my mom came from that city, which was pretty cosmopolitan, and my great grandfather was the factor for one of the cotton mills in that town. That town had 5 cotton mills, and the town was divided up into villages around each cotton mill. My family was a part of the Dallas mill. And so my mom grew up taking tap blessings, ballet lessons, vocal lessons. She thought she was going to be Verushka. She was, she had ambition, a voracious reader, beautiful piano player. And she ended up here in Lewes, on Lewes Beach, which was a big cultural shock for her. They brought her in under cover of night. They arrived, and she said it was a foggy night, and they stayed at the house that's now a couple businesses across from the 1812 park. And they had an apartment, which was, I think, the upstairs of that, or maybe half of it. And they had said, we're going to Lewes, Delaware. It's on the Atlantic Ocean. You're going to be able to go swimming. Or we're going to be staying at this rooming house for a while that's right across from a park. And my mom woke up in the morning, and she looked out the window, and she saw the canal, and she saw that park, and she yelled down to her mother, "Mother, is that the park that you told me about?" And the park in Huntsville's big. It's a city park. And she said, "Yes, dear." And she said, "If you tell me that little stream there is the Atlantic Ocean, I'm going to scream." But she came to love Lewes, even though she always told this story. My mother was a beautician, and so she knew everybody, and she really connected with young people. So she did all the young people's hair. For the prom, she did everybody's hair. For the Miss Lewis contest, she did everybody's hair. Someone was telling a story in the shop one day, and they were talking about somebody. And Mrs. Atkins, the Atkins family had what is now Parcells Funeral Home, and she was about 90 years old. She flipped up the hair dryer head and commenting about the man that the family she was talking. She said, "They're not local. His father came here in 1920. And my mom said, "Well, I guess I'll never be a local."
Ed, it's hard to know when reality stops and the stories about you begin. For example, did you start skipping school at some point?
Oh, yes.
To work on? Oh.
Yeah, we did that a lot. We would, one of the things that we would do is we would drive over with somebody that was old enough, to Chuck Levin's music store, Washington Music, because it had everything. And we went over there one time when my uncle had moved here. And in your early bands, it was made up of probably two people who had musical ability, and then your friends. And you said, "Oh, we need somebody to play bass. You would play bass. How about you want to play keyboards?" It would be like that. Well, we went over there and bought. We would go over there, and then on the way back, we would make up stories about somebody famous that we saw over there, And it was plausible. Like if one time the Beach Boys were playing nearby, and we told everybody the Beach Boys came in there, and we got to meet them. But one of the most kind of stupid things that we were doing a big dance at the Fellowship Hall at Bethel, and they let us practice there. We had keys to that, and we could go after school, which is pretty amazing. The parish at the Episcopal Church, which got tore down now, but it's where the meditative walk garden is. There was an old Victorian there. They let kids hang out there after school, and we would go in there and play music. But anyhow, we had this big dance, so we decided to skip school Friday and get ready and go practice. We're in there practicing, and a couple of our dads walked in and said, "What do you think you're doing?" And we like, "Well, we got our big show tonight," or whatever. I don't know if we thought we were invisible or what, but
so you got caught.
We got caught. Yeah.
Why did you take up the drums?
Well, I always loved the drums. I just always loved the drums. Piano was my first formal instrument. I started taking lessons from Dr. Stanball's wife, Mrs. Stanball, when I was probably 5. But I always was beating on things. My dad made a conga drum out of some sort of a wooden container, like a small wooden barrel, that I played and sang a song at my kindergarten graduation. I sang, all day, all night, Mary Ann. That was a hit song at that time. It was on that whole introducing America to calypso music. That calypso.
So
beat.
you were performing in kindergarten.
Yeah.
So this has always been part of who you are.
I was a ham then. I got more self-conscious as I got to puberty. I don't know why. I wish I didn't. It would have been better for me, but I did.
And when did you, was it high school where you started thinking about, hey, I could be a musician?
Yeah, I mean, I always sang and played and always, I wanted to be a singer. But I was also good at art. And I looking around all the, during that time, it hadn't hit the band thing yet. It was all just singers. And so there was Frankie Avalon, and people like that. Elvis, they all were swarthy guys with dark hair, and I thought, I guess that's not for me, because I was a carrot top. I was a redhead freckled guy. So I thought, well, maybe I guess art might be where I'll go. But when the Beatles came out, by American standards, with the exception of Paul, who was cute, they weren't good-looking guys. So everybody thought, yeah, there might be a chance here. I'll take that back. I'll rethink this. And then I went to college. When I met Dave Durr, who was one of the guys in Jack of Diamonds, we both knew that the key was going to be writing songs, and that's what we needed to do. And we had that connection. And so that's kind of, I took a flyer to leave teaching. And
because when you got out of college, you started teaching here, right?
I taught at Milton Junior High, yeah.
Yeah. And what were you teaching?
Special ed.
And was that a vibrant program then, as it is today?
No, it was. I mean, it was in its kind of infancy, For one thing, there are all the exceptionalities. You would have somebody who had a learning disability like dyslexia would be in with kids that were emotionally disturbed. It was just a catch-all thing.
Weren't you able to actually get some kids back in to normal school by addressing what they specifically needed?
I did. There were several, at least three that that were very, very good. Some of them you kind of wonder, how did you end up here? So I got them put in regular class with the idea from the teacher that if there's any problem, just send them back. But let's give them a chance, because I think that this could be a toehold for them. And it worked out for three of them, yeah. And that's a good batting average.
That's fantastic. So was the friendship you just mentioned earlier, is that what led to Jack of Diamonds?
Yeah, that was the band. And we had a nice run. It's a shame. Music was changing just at the time when we had a chance to, record and release a record. The style of stuff that we were playing was taken over by what they were calling new wave music, and we weren't doing that. We kind of found a niche for that if we could have stayed together, we would have been a kind of a softer version of, say, kind of what the Red Hot Chili Peppers do, something like that, kind of a punk funk type of a thing. The wheel spun, and our number didn't come up. So,
but you were, if you lived, as I understand, if you lived in Delaware during that time and up and down the East Coast, you were extremely popular.
Oh, Jack of Diamonds had a huge following, and our song Dodge City became an anthem for a certain age group of people, and have fond memories of that band and coming to see us. That was a great band. It was a great time. We didn't really break up. We were just exhausted, and we've decided that rather than record songs that each of us wrote individually, that the key was going to be songs that we wrote together. And that would involve all the elements. And Dodge City was a song that we all wrote. So we took this break, and during this break, the Hooters, famous Philadelphia group's bass player, was in a car accident. Robbie and Eric called me and said, Ed, we want to borrow, we're not trying to steal Andy, we want to borrow him while our bass player convalesces. And I said, we're kind of on an open-ended hiatus here. I think it's going to last, several months. Well, they just took off, and their bass player never really recovered enough to go out and have the vitality to tour. And so we never got back together again. And that's when I moved to New York. I had an opportunity to go to Nashville or New York, and I really didn't want to play country music at that time, what was happening down there. So I moved to New York, joined a band and did a lot of session work, and eventually, joined AFTRA and did some voiceover and some singing on commercials and stuff. And then got a record deal, and then got a publishing deal and another record deal. Lost that deal, and my partner, Keith Mack, decided to move to the West Coast. And my wife, we decided if we wanted to try to have a family. And so I got a job, and I was a sales manager for a women's sportswear company. And I had an office overlooking Times Square. She got pregnant, and then music has always had a way of, grabbing me back. And my manager started a children's label, and RCA bought the label, and he was the president of it. And so the first project was a musical project called Man in the Moon. And it was going to be, it was a cool story about there's a man living on the moon, and he keeps care of the moon, and he keeps the moon company. And the moon is moody. And one day, and he cheers her up. Cheering her up is when she's full, and one day a month he's allowed to come down. He surfs with the stardust down to Earth and grants a wish that a child has made on the moon. Roger Daltrey was the singer, and wow. The whole thing was going to be, eventually, if it happened, would have gone on Broadway. The Lion King was just setting records on Broadway and reinventing Times Square. They talk about, the police cracking down. Mm-hmm. That had a lot to do with it, but commerce had a lot to do with it. The street had a lot to do with it. In a play that appealed to adults and children, had people flocking to Times Square. So what's going to happen?
And I think not everyone appreciates that at that time, Times Square was not a place you're going to take your kids.
No. But that changed everything, because if you build up, they will come. Then there were restaurants, shops for that group of people, and then that grew. Anyhow, I'm closing my door at my showroom, and I've got people up there writing songs and recording demos up there, and really I really thought that was going to be. I really thought that had a chance of being something that would change all of our lives. Roger Daltrey dropped out. He tried to do a tour doing the music of The Who with a guest singer at every stop. So guest singers, contemporary guys like Eddie Vedder, for instance. And the tour absolutely flopped. And they canceled it after 3 dates. Wow. And so he went back. He went to his trout farm in Scotland and was incommunicado. And he just said, the message was, my career can't take another failure like that. And a children's record at this time, I'm just not I'm not sure about it. So we had started recording it. I mean, we were in the studio recording it. So,
Ed, many of us have pretended to be a lead singer, normally, fortunately, in the privacy of our own shower. What is it really like to play in front of a live audience that is hanging on your every note, watching your every movement, screaming and cheering?
Well, it's a joy that you can't really, I can't compare it to anything really. It just is, well, if you become successful singing, you can sing, you know. I mean, everybody can sing. And you know, you just go to a place that's, musically we call that going to the mountain. There are moments, one moment that stands out to me, and there are many of them. But this was, we're doing a concert at the Avalon Theater, and it was after the Wild Hair CD, Vinyl Shockley album had come out. And my mother had just passed away, and one of her favorite songs was Somewhere Over the Rainbow. So I sang it. We did a version of it. And I started singing, and it was, you could hear a pin drop, but I heard people shushing people. And that was one of the happiest moments of my life. I mean, you know, because that song meant so much to me, and I was in a real emotional place singing it. But that everybody wanted to listen enough that even if someone was shushing people, I couldn't hear a thing. And I was like, this is cool.
When you sing, there's more than just singing a song. I mean, if you're doing it well, it's a bit of an emotional experience. It can be exhausting, right?
It is. I mean, you know, if you're living the lyrics and you're there, what people like about performers are they're exposing themselves. Even athletes, you're running down the field as hard as you can. You're trying to catch that ball. You might get creamed. You might drop the ball. You might catch it and be the hero. But in that moment, you're very, very human to everybody watching it. Singing and playing is the same way. And I think that's why people like to go see it. And if you can connect to them, that's a connection that people feel and you feel.
Once you've experienced the mountain, I think is what you said, do you sort of want to get that feeling again? Do you kind of keep searching for a way to get that back?
Oh yeah. And you know, you don't always know. You can't manufacture it. You know, you can put yourself in the position to succeed better by how you surround yourself and how prepared you are. But I'll tell you, a moment that was something for me was the first concert after COVID. The Funsters were playing at Stango Park, and it was, I think there were 2,000 people there. But the feeling from that audience of the joy of being together with people, that feeling that was something.
Wow. And like a professional athlete, does it take time to adjust when the cheering stops? When it's back to the relative obscurity of normal life?
You know, it's that's a funny thing because, you know, as you get older, you start to experience that. And this is something that I've been trying to figure out a way to express this musically or lyrically in a way that would, you know, it's hard to write lyrics about something and not be didactic. You know, you never want to show, but not tell. You don't want to preach at all. But the concept of context, as you get older, you start losing context because the things that create your living space, huge. You know, the Beatles would be one fence post for me. You know, my friends, my family, they're gone. The fence is broken. You know, and then as you get older and older, I watched it with my dad, losing all of his friends. Nobody nobody knows the world as you know it. They don't have a clue. And so there you are. And that's why, as I've gotten older, when I visit my friends, I say, we're having a conversation, just standing next to each other. What we share, we both know. Don't need words. But you lose that, and so the not being recognized, in some ways is it's a double-edged sword, because you always want people to remember you, but being an anonymous citizen is nice too. And that's from being with this little bit of notoriety here in Delaware and in my world. You never get tired of it, but at the same time, sometimes you just wish that you could go somewhere, and I especially going and seeing a band is really hard for me, because I like to listen to them. And so many people come up to talk to me, and I want to talk to them, but I also would like to listen to the band and find it, from my point of view, disrespectful to not listen, and that's just because I take it all seriously. Everybody there's supposed to be having fun any way that they want to. And so of course they're going to be talking to their friends while you're playing.
So you lived in New York for roughly 2 decades.
Yes.
And you were doing session music, which is so great. But you were a member of AFTA. You're getting work, writing, recording. You were doing commercials and so on. Is there a commercial that sort of stands out for you?
The singing, "Yes, Sir, That's My Baby" for a Burger King commercial. A Burger King commercial.
What led to your return to Lewes?
When our son was going to start school, we were looking for a private school, because he needed he would benefit from a small class size. He came out of Montessori preschool and kindergarten, so we kind of were hoping that they would continue some of that, especially that math approach. And we found a school up in I think that town is called Collegeville. It's right next to Longwood Gardens. So that was going to be a 40-minute ride each way, but we had applied, and I was at an event. I was playing at an event at the Mount Cuba Observatory, and I met the headmistress. Well, we would say headmaster now of the school, of that school, and I didn't realize I knew her. And we were talking, and she was telling me that her parents had moved retired down to Lewes, and she mentioned this school in Georgetown that was being mentored by the school up there was called the Upland School. The school here was called Jefferson School. So we went over and saw the school, and we knew that it was a perfect fit for our son. And the idea of raising him here around family was, that when we found that school, that all the tumblers fell into place, and we had bought a house down here already, but so we decided to move. I bought the house right behind my family's property on Manila, so I could walk back and forth. My mom had recently died, so I think mortality was kind of very much present in us, and my dad was. So I was kind of expecting my dad probably to die soon, but thankfully he didn't. He lived till he was 94. But that whole thing and my brother moved back from Chicago with his young family, so those cousins grew up together. So it was really great. I really didn't. it really was a leap of faith because the type of work that my wife did in banking doesn't really exist in this state. When we lived in Wilmington, we were going back and forth, and we could go on the train or we could drive. But I got a call to do a final on Burt's Bees. No, it wasn't a final. They told me that if I came and did the audition, I was going to get it, but it was a formality I had to do. So it was the day of my son's graduation from kindergarten. And I said, can we do it early in the day? Can we do it like at 7 in the morning? Or can we do it toward the end of the day? And, my agent said, Ed, you don't ask those questions. And you don't, I knew that. And I said, well, Andrea, I'm not going to do it. And she said, well, Ed, I don't know if I want to represent you. What's the point? And I said, Andre, your son's a year older than mine. Have you missed any event of his? And she said, no, but I'm not a singer. That's not my job. So then when we moved down here, it didn't matter, because I couldn't go back up there for a go-see.
When did you start Vinyl Shockley?
In the mid-'90s. I had been writing songs and collecting these songs that didn't really fit in to any music scene. And then all these groups the artists that they now call Americana started bubbling up. And when I started hearing that music, I said, this is the time to try to do this. So I started it in New York before we moved, and I had a band there, and we were rehearsing. And then I had come down to Wilmington to do a session down here, and with friends of mine, Dennis and Dale Melton, who are twin brothers who have played in bands, and we've played together on and off for many years. And Kevin Walsh, who was someone who I'd recorded with, and we had a writing connection. We just seemed to be on the same wavelength as writing. I was coming down for a few days, and so I'd been playing some stuff, and they said, we'd be interested in recording this with you. And that's how it started. So,
and you've had people, musicians, artists coming in and out.
Yeah.
You're sort of the center core of it.
Me and Kevin Walsh are the only people that, it became our thing, really, because he and I wrote, most of the songs together.
I know faith has played a large role in your life. What led to the formation of the Reminders?
I heard a song in church called Sanctuary, and it really touched me. It put a burden on me because I had always put spiritual lean into my lyrics, and every once in a while there'd be a little line there that if you were paying attention, you realized that that I might be a Christian. But I'd never written an overtly overtly Christian message song, and that song challenged me. In church, they only sing the chorus; they don't sing the verses. But it's very, Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. That's so simple. It's hard not to be sucked into that. And so anyhow, that just was rolling around my brain, and then literally, it's a longer story, but the guy that wrote that song knocked on my door and said, Ed, I have moved to Delaware, and I'm a songwriter, and I love to co-write. And I saw you at a singer-songwriter thing, and I think we could write some songs together. So we met at Azafran, had lunch, and telling each other about it. Came to find out we were both in New York, overlapping at the same time. His son went to Xavier Academy, which is a Jesuit private school that was on my block. they closed our block for their recess. I probably bumped into him there. Anyhow, so he's telling me, what we had done. And he said, well, I've been in the country music and Christian music, and I've written a couple of songs you might know. And I said, so what? And he said, well, I was the composer on El Shaddai, which is the Amy Grant, Grammy. It's a huge, huge song. And he said, and there's another song, depending on what church you go to, that is sung a lot. And I said, what's that? And he said, Sanctuary. And the hair on my body stood up. And it's one of those things where be careful what you ask for, because I was like, okay. Now my excuses are getting thin and few now. I guess I'm supposed to go down this road. And we've written probably 50 songs together.
Did the Funsters really start with a reunion of some old music friends from down here when you were in high school?
Yeah, after the Beatles came out, everybody, every town had at least one band or two bands. In Lewes, we had two bands. We had the Creators, that was my band, and we had the Castaways, which was Rush Ellis's band. And they kind of played surf music. They went that direction. We were doing more, I don't know, all kind of stuff. We were a little grittier than they were. And my voice was, more of, I like soulful music, and they were more like Dave Clark Five and the Beatles. And we were like the Animals and I don't know. Anyhow, but that was in every town, And so in Georgetown, there was a band called the Morticians, and Ken Tung was in that band. He was the singer and leader. In Milton, there was a band called the Electrons, and Pat Tobin was in that band. And anyhow, we all went to the University of Delaware, and we found ourselves up there. We knew each other. We had been in these competing bands, and then we formed other bands, and those commingled. All those people became that whole group of people, and the people from Seaford were involved in that. It was the movie before the Sixth Sense that.
Yeah. What was
M. Night Shyamalan?
M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah, he does all of his films around Philly if he can, and Sherman Ward is an AD, an assistant director. What the assistant director does is first he goes out with the script, and he scouts all the shooting locales and makes note of everything about it. Where the trucks are going to park, how they're going to set up, where the shoot's going to come from. He also manages all the talents, comings and goings, the trailers for wardrobe and all of that. And then the day of, he's the traffic cop, and Sherman, seeing him in action in New York, stop traffic on Fifth Avenue and go give each cabbie $100 bill and say, don't let anybody buy you. This is going to take 5 minutes, and shoot up, a scene of somebody walking across Fifth Avenue was thrilling. This is another funny aside of this. He called me one time and said, Ed, where's Jill? I said, she's at the hairdresser. So he said, don't call her right now. I said, why? And he said, I need her to come and stand in for Brooke Shields for all the lighting setup. And he said, it's going to be 2 days. And I said, I'll call her. He said, don't let her cut her hair right now. So she got that gig, and she hung out with Brooke Shields in her trailer with Andre Agassi. And Sherman was like, oh, golly sakes. Anyhow, they were doing a rap for one of those movies, and then the cast and crew had heard that Sherman had a band, but he didn't have a band. He did have a band, but and so he called all of us, all of the guys, and we at Liberty Place in Philly we played, and so we had like 4 guitar players, 3 drummers, 2 bass players, and so after that, all the guys that were in a band, more or less in a band with me in college now, were playing again, and they lived, I was still in New York then, but so we started getting together once, maybe first it was like once every 4 months, and then we became more and more popular. When we got the name, the Funsters came from Keith and I would come down to visit and always play because, for one thing, it helped pay for our trip down. And it was the best way to see most of our friends because it was a gathering spot that, so you could see all your friends, and we came down with a friend of ours that we had a band that we played in called the Funsters. His name's Pat Cowden, and he's one of the funniest guys in the world. And so we were the Funsters. So when we started playing down here, I didn't even pay Kenny Lingo owned the Rosencrown then. I didn't even think about them advertising, but they advertised us as the Funsters, and it was a while before I even realized it. And our friend was quite mad about it. I mean, the Funsters was his name.
The actual band, the Funsters.
Yeah. And we actually referred to ourselves for a while. Well, Greer White did, who kind of booked the band then, as the Big Funsters, because it's a big band. Anyhow, so that's how we got together, and it's been, we had no plan on any of this, or could even have conceived this band being as popular as they'd become, and that's the best way for something to happen, because...
Do you think in some ways one of the appeals of the band is the fact that you all are such good friends? Does it bleed into the performance? Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I think people pick up on that. We don't take ourselves too seriously, and we never really had an agenda, it was very much a come as you are thing,
There's an almost classic story arc to your life, mirrored by your own decision to return to where you were born. All those performances, all the travel, the groups, the studio sessions, and the thousands and thousands of miles traveled. What is it about Lewes that made you choose to come home?
My wife remarked one time, we were having dinner with a group of friends in New York, and she said, well, Ed may have left Lewes, but Lewes never left Ed. And I don't know... I feel the soul of Lewes. Some places have soul, and Lewes does have soul. When I went up to the University of Delaware and met all these friends from all the other towns, the way I felt about Lewes, they didn't feel that way about their town. And that made me study that. And I think Lewes has a soul. It is old. It has stories that go back, that tickle your imagination, So that's what I think. And, I've been gathering those stories. Hazel Brittingham has the real story, but I have the vernacular story of those events.
Well, hopefully there's a book coming.
Well, several people have to die before that book can be written.
Ed, thanks for joining us today, for sharing so much of your remarkable life and giving us a glimpse into the life on the other side of the stage.
Oh, thank you so much. And thanks for doing this. This is very cool.
Thanks. And thanks for the fun and happiness you brought to so many people here and elsewhere with your music. Lewes wouldn't be the place it is without you.
Thank you.
And thanks to today's sponsor, the Lewes Chamber of Commerce. And please remember, they don't only work on behalf of local businesses, they are a wonderful resource for anyone who is visiting or wants a better idea of what's happening around town. And thank you for listening. When we started this podcast, our goal was simple: to find a way to celebrate the remarkable people who, with no plan or agenda, are making Lewes such a unique and appealing town. Yes, we have the beach, the park, the water, and the history, but it's the people here that are responsible for the town's true, real beauty and charm. Thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to talking soon. Till next time, this has been We in Lewes, the podcast.